wells froze up, so the gas didn't show up. Oh, the pipelines weren't operating the way that they should, or oh, this customer was pulling more than they should have, and dragging up demand. So there just has to be a lot more discussion. There has to be a lot more collaboration in these types of events. And I think the lines of communication and the dialogue is there. It's getting better, but it's not perfect. There's still more work to be done.
Let's say real quick on the cyber side, if you're not doing lessons learned, your adversaries are. So they're looking at that and they're studying that, and they'll have energy professionals that they're employing to figure out where the weak points are. So if you're not figuring it out, they're gonna. So your warning bell is their dinner bell.
I'll just say a lot more pre-planning and establishing the objectives for your infrastructure. How do you want it to, part of resilience is designing it to, how do you want it to work in the worst event that it's going to face in its entire life cycle. And if you're not planning around that, your system will have a failure, and you'll have to have another lessons learned meeting around that. And so that's the big part in terms of the upfront planning, is evaluating. And that's why a lot of the infrastructure we build is planners are starting to look at that 1 in 50 year, 1 in 100 year, 1 in 500 year event, because of the infrastructure is designed for 50, 60 plus years. We have to start to look at that and understand it. And if we're not, we've decided to live with that risk.
Sejal, yeah.
Thank you.
No.
Should be green.
Okay. Sorry. So I was intrigued, and I guess I was just intrigued with your separation of IT and OT when you were talking about cybersecurity. And I found that interesting because just think a lot of utilities, gas and electric, have very older customer management systems and just generally operating systems. And to go off of what the woman over there said about, how that cost to upgrade all of that to meet those needs is going to play out. But just my question is on the understanding of what OT, like, is that the operational side, like smart meters versus smart substations? Like, how are you framing that?
So the cyber world has split itself into this concept of IT and OT. By the way, that's starting to meld a lot more now, but IT is the traditional stuff that we all know, our computers, everything that we're using here, and it affects business functions. Bad guys are trying to steal data, they're trying to manipulate data, and they have all the reasons to go do that. But in any kind of any kind of critical infrastructure, particularly in energy, you actually cross over in the network. They literally have a firewall, a separator called the DMZ. They call it the demilitarized zone. I kid you not. And below that and everything else is what they call OT, or operational technology. And that is all the meters, all the SCADA systems, all the HMI, all the, anything, the DCS systems, anything that makes energy run or get transported on that operational side is under OT. But that's a way different type of environment. The maturity level is a lot less. The visibility is a lot less. The controls a lot less. It's because traditionally IT is taking care of the IT side. And they said, oh, OTs, that's an operational problem. And all the operational folks said, oh, no, that sounds techie. That sounds like an IT problem. Everyone's been playing kick the can until the bad guy said, oh, look what we can do. And again, on OT, they're trying to do cyber physical. They're trying to shut stuff down. They're trying to blow stuff up. They're trying to slow stuff down. They're trying to mess with the actual operation. So that's operational risk and safety. That's site safety, public safety, environmental safety. It's the whole gambit. And so traditionally, those have been quite separated. What's happening now is usually the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, has the rose pinned on them and says, go make us safe. And they look at the OT side and like, I don't even know how that works. Like, I don't even know what's there. Okay. And so they're in a real bind. Then they get asked again, how's it going? They're going, oh man, it's great. And they say all the IT stuff that they're doing because they're a little insecure to say, I have no idea what's going on the OT side. So you're going to get that sort of disparity, but you have things happening now that you have IT attacks that have OT effects. Colonial Pipeline was one, right? That was an IT attack. Okay, but they shut down the pipeline for a week. So that's an OT consequence on that. You've got IIoT, which is IoT in the industrial area, all the cool gauges and all the cool stuff that you get plugged in and everything. That bypasses a lot of the network. It goes straight via cellular to the internet. So you just bypassed everything. Okay, so that whole, they call it the Purdue model, but this whole model that separates them, it's kind of collapsing now. But you still have to understand that OT side works fundamentally differently. You said things last 50 years, right? IT side, they last, what, 5 years before you replace them? So they're putting stuff on. IT, they care about, making sure that all the systems, they have the visibility and control. OT, it's uptime. We do not want to be down for 1 second. Right? That's a whole different type of priority system. So these are very different environments. And the more everyone starts understanding there's IT and there's OT, again, they're blending, but understand that OT is a whole different game. But that's the new game. That's where bad guys are starting to go, oh, okay, I can do stuff there. I can do cyber physical. Man, I got a whole different level I can play. Help.
Hi, yep, I'm Sean Thierry from EPRI. This is primarily a gas question. When we look at the resource plans for our region, we see like a transition from coal to lots of gas plus renewables, or lots of renewables plus gas, however you want to say it. When I hear about the story of the winter events where firm contracts are overridden because of force majeure, that to me sounds like today we have a survivable event because we have one set of resources. In the future, like what makes a system that's more reliant on gas able to survive similar sorts of events when similar sorts of force majeure overrides your firm gas supply contract? And like, what's a utility or a regulator to do about that?
I mean, so I would say, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think it's really on the planning side. If there's the supply's there, it's just how's it going to show up? And there's no shortage of infrastructure being proposed to ensure that gas shows up. The challenge is getting it permitted and built. So, again, the utility can't solve it on its own. The power companies, the electric companies can't solve it on their own. The pipeline companies can't solve it on their own. So there is the regulator piece, which I haven't mentioned yet, is important as well. And a lot of that's being looked at, a lot of it's being considered, but there's absolutely a lot of work, and it's very complex to ensure that, when those new plants do come online, that I showed, that the gas is there to run those plants. And the other thing I'll mention, and I haven't touched on this yet, is we all have to plan for a peak. And that makes it even more challenging. And it also, that aspect of it's changing as well. So the peak is changing, and the occurrence of a peak is changing. So historically, you would have, we've talked about a once in 100 years or once in 50 years. But we're seeing these peaks or these very difficult high demand times more often than we've seen historically. And the only thing I can come to, or at least think that's driving that, is the fact that additional infrastructure is needed, additional energy supply is needed in the areas that need it to be consumed. So we'll see what happens, but I certainly think that infrastructure is going to need to be built as additional demand hits the system.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm here as a retired citizen, and I think you all are doing great analysis. It bothers me that on television, the weatherman says, oh, great, we're having a warm day in winter. In other words, this kind of thinking is still not permeating our culture enough. It seems that we can't just leave it to Bill McKibben and Al Gore to shift the public culture. Can you and your connections do more to help make the public culture realize that we need to take individual steps toward electric vehicles and heat pumps and so on? Is that in your thinking at all? How to spread the message?
Excellent question. And what I would, in serving a multitude of interests of clients, there are ways in which we, my job is to more explain the benefits and the costs of these things to the policymakers, if you will. My job is not to be a policymaker as much as I may want to be. It's to inform policymakers. And so that's the approach that we've taken within the niche that I know. And what I've come to learn in the space that I work, I know it very well, and started to learn, wow, there's probably people like me in other spaces. So to start to opine outside of where I'm at, I might be on shaky ground doing that. And so in terms of advocacy around that, we are enabling the clean energy transition in that front. And so what I would say, what we really help utilities do is around what sort of standard of pole should they use? Like it's so simple. What sort of standard pole? Because with a bigger pole, I can put a bigger wire. And once I have a bigger wire, I now have flexibility to do things in terms of load transfer to enable, whether it be DERs, EVs, whatever policymakers push, the grid is able to take on that reality in a more real way. So that's kind of a little piece of where we're doing it.
Yeah, I'll just touch on real quick. At Spire, we offer a lot of energy efficiency programs. So we absolutely are pushing energy efficiency within our region. We put out messaging to our customers, especially during peak times, about steps that they can take to reduce their energy consumption. Additionally, we're constantly looking at other programs. We've got a carbon offset initiative that we're working on right now that allows our customers to purchase carbon offsets to offset some of the consumption that they're using. And we're also looking at alternative fuel sources such as renewable natural gas, and trying to tap into some of the resources that are out there that we can use to serve our customers.
And I mean, we got a question here. Okay. The other thing, I think everything that you guys are talking about really does lend itself to adaptation, right? No matter how you look at it, we're adapting to new technologies. We're adapting to the weather. We're adapting to the needs and the desires or the concerns of certain individuals. In Missouri, there's a lot of focus, whether it be on agriculture or industry, on adaptation, and whether that be climate adaptation or business adaptation for a new market. Those are things that we hear a lot about in the industry, and it may not be the language that the folks on the Weather Channel are using or their audience, but it does seem that the business community and the leaders of the state in general do acknowledge the adaptation need and do see a plan and a process with the type of information that you see here and that others are sharing. So there's a bridge to what you're saying, but not necessarily exactly, maybe a bridge not as far as you would like, if that makes sense. So yeah, question in the back.
Yeah, hi, good morning. My name is Gina Mace. I'm with Summit Utilities, and this question is probably primarily meant for David, but I'm going to ask it later to Casey as well with SPP. But I'm curious what you believe the role of RTOs is in the gas electric coordination. Because I know we're talking about working together collaboratively, and some of the RTOs recently released a joint paper with some of their thoughts. And so just curious if you could share where Spire's landing on that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I know exactly where Spire's landing on it. I followed that, personally. From my perspective, I think the RTOs really need to enforce and stand behind additional discussion. So, I think there's, the joint paper and understanding everyone's perspectives on the situation at hand is really important. But I think there's a lot of discussion on a very, very complex topic. I think that's the biggest challenge with the gas electric coordination harmonization effort is it's very complex. And I'll admit this just personally, I ran our gas supply group. I don't understand the electric side the way that the folks on the electric side do. And I don't think they understand the gas side as much as the pure play, gas companies do. And so that presents a challenge when you're trying to have conversations, right? If you've got two levels of expertise and two different perspectives on how things are being operated and being done. And so trying to bring that together in order to truly understand, both points of view to then make, decisions that, again, it's probably not going to be a situation where, both sides feel like they've gotten exactly what they want. There's going to have to be some concessions made in order to ensure that, that we're all working together on a common goal.
Great. Any online questions? Not yet. Okay. Was Mike, did you have a question?
You called me Mike.
Yes, I did. Oh, sorry,
Thank
Mark.
you. So no, just a quick statement. This is maybe even, I'm Mark Piazza with API, maybe even a shameless plug. This whole cyber issue is really significant because when you don't have access to the equipment that you need to operate, but there's significant national energy supply and demand issues, we're working on a recommended practice on returning to normal operations after a significant event. So I don't know if that's of interest to any one of the three of you. Our recommended practice process is open to anyone who wants to participate. And a lot of it, the key part of it's going to be around that cybersecurity issue and how you address that after an incident happens. When are you confident that you can actually go back and use your computing systems, all your operating systems, even your IT, right? So I just wanted to make sure that there was an awareness, and to the extent anybody in here wants to participate, reach out and let me know.
Well, yes, please. And yes, that is important. And I would take that because that's a huge part of this, right? Confidence gets also eroded when a major attack happens, especially when you got caught unaware and you don't know what to do next. Part of that lessons learned. How do you get that back? It's part of the recovery process is that we've become more resilient to do it next time when we've adapted. And so any types of thing that happens is right. Because again, what is a warning bell for us is a dinner bell for the bad guys. And after, in fact, the Colonial Pipeline happened, you saw an increase in attacks across all critical infrastructure. You had attacks on the water supply. You had other attacks on renewable energy. You had attacks on manufacturing, because they all of a sudden they started taking those lessons learned and started applying them in other areas. So it's not just an attack on one sector. This is all about how we're all connected. Right? They go to other ways. And if you see an attack on another sector, it'll come back into this one. So anytime anyone who's promoting anything with that, this goes also back to the conversation we had that was brought up earlier. Anything that we can get the conversation going and understand better how to adapt, not only to how we live, but actually how we protect ourselves and with the resiliency and get ahead of it. We need to band together. The bad guys are. We need to start getting it better. So yes, we would thank you for the plug because we'll take it.
Great. And Mark will also be presenting in a couple of sessions as well. One last question. Yes.
Thanks, Josh. Megawatt Matt. I'm a poles and wires guy myself, but I like anaerobic digesters and small modular reactors. And I wonder why we can't just build them all on the same place. Because if I'm going to blow something up, I want the anaerobic digester and everything all together. You know, that's kind of my mentality. I'm curious as to economies of scale, shared infrastructure, you know, what other benefits and how do we make this less costly and how do we all work together at the community level? And, you know, how do we educate everybody and what are we doing? Come on, somebody tell me. I just want to build something.
They're all looking
Forgive
at
me, I
me.
think
Isn't that
I'm
great?
looking for your perspective on resiliency, redundancy, cybersecurity. You know, I think it all plays together. So what benefits are there?
So in terms of infrastructure being built, the folks down south in Florida and along the Gulf are kind of leading the way in terms of rebuilding a hardened, more resilient grid. What I would say is the solutions that they are employing are more of the traditional sense. Stronger poles, stronger wires, putting infrastructure underground. There has been a desire to evaluate more creative solutions. The problem with the creative solutions is they're not proven yet. And so one of the instances we looked at is adding DERs within the city of New Orleans. Well, the problem with that is how big does the battery need to be? And once the battery gets a certain size, I now have to have a water tank above the battery in case anything happens. And so once you get to a place where the DER is big enough to support a resilience use case, you've now gone into the safety regulations in order to do that are real. And how proven is that technology in that case? And so what I would say right now, the industry, if we're going to deploy more creative offerings, those creative offerings have to learn to be proven, established, because what resilience is the worst day you can remember in your whole life. And we can't just hope that it works, because hope is not a strategy. And so that's part of where the other parts of the industry need to look at on that front. Probably a lot more DOE type of activity. And how do we really use DERs for resilience use case? I know there's a lot of fascination with DERs in terms of energy arbitrage and paying for themselves that way. But resilience is a total different ballgame. And that's hard to communicate, is that DER needs to show up after that category for hurricane when there's clouds for days, likely, because we've got to get personal with it. There are people without power, without water, who are trying to figure out how to live. And so when you think of it that way, and get it like people you might know, or people you know who know them, that's why this is why I'm passionate about making sure that we can have a more resilient grid. And so that's kind of the answer to your question there. No, it's not what you want to hear. But when it comes down to where a utility is at, and you have to recognize where a utility is going to be at. If they go ask for $5 million to go put up a DER, and they say, hey, commission, we want this for when the storm happens, and then that storm happens and that DER didn't show up, oh, someone's in trouble in front of that commission, a lot of trouble. And so that's a little bit of the challenge on that front, is who owns the risk as well. And so that's probably why we're not as into some of those more creative solutions on that front.
With cyber, economies of scale isn't dependent on physical, right? It's how you collaborate and how you network in. So sharing of information of an attack from one, and how does everyone else then harden up against that? That's one of the ways. So that information sharing arena, how you get these pockets of expertise, because in OT, it's all over the place, but how do you get to those experts quickly? That's another way that you can do economies of scale, because you're just not going to have them in every location. Not everyone here is going to have a 24/7 security operations center running. So then you can centralize that in that sense to make that cost go down, because if everyone built it themselves, it'd be wildly expensive. So it is naturally built into the concept of cybersecurity. It's not always used, right? So how do you start getting that connectivity between, once we're traditional competitors? And you can look at other industries. The banking industry did this. They started what they called ISACs, information sharing and analysis centers. At the beginning, they hated each other. They're like, I'm not going to share information with those people. They're my competitors. Well, when they came to cyber, they decided that they better, and they were better for it. So there's ways to do that cost savings and the efficacy to go up in cyber, but it takes a lot of collaboration.
All right. Thank you all very much. If you all join